Role and function. As an independent statutory body, the Commission is charged with making civil service appointments, promotions, and discipline. In its mission, we have to safeguard the impartiality and integrity of appointments and promotions within the public service, and to ensure that fairness and a broad consistency in disciplinary punishment are maintained throughout the service. When we think about delegations of powers order, the Commission, through the Constitution, has given the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Labor and Public Service the power or the authority to make appointments within the service. These powers are delegated powers, and that is found under Article 110 of the Constitution. However, I must mention that when the permanent secretary of the Ministry of the Public Service makes appointments on behalf of the Commission, they are at the lower level of the salary scale. For instance, teachers, scale S12, messengers, scale M. We have other clerical grades. We have the nursing auxiliaries, and all of those scales that are at the lower echelon of the service. The permanent secretary of the Ministry of the Public Service uses this delegation of powers to make these appointments. And as such, later on, these same appointments, they come to the PSC for confirmation in appointment. That is, if an individual have been appointed on 12 months probation, or for permanent and pensionable establishment. That is, if they have been appointed on temporary month-to-month terms. We will then confirm them in those appointments. Earlier, we said that the Commission, the Secretariat of the Commission, has 14 staff, but not all 14 of those staff reviews recommendations or submission that were submitted by MPS for consideration. We have about 6 individuals that reviews the recommendations for the entire public service. We review recommendations such as accelerated increments, in short 7A. All it means is you went out, you got some additional qualifications, and now the government is giving you a reward for those qualifications. Let's just say an associate degree and above. Acting appointments, that's another one. Another recommendation that comes to us often, especially for head posts. We know that persons who hold the post of permanent secretary, those offices should never be left unmanned. So of course an acting appointment will come to ensure that that office is covered. Appeals, that happens through the appeal board, which is another board. All it means that someone was disciplined and they did not agree with the procedure that took place, and so then they appeal to the appeals board, of course through the means of normal processing. We said it earlier, appointments, and we talk about the 12 months probation and then also on temporary month-to-month terms. And again, those individuals who were appointed on temporary month-to-month, they would go to the P&PE. That's short, you know. Okay, and so we have the awards of benefit. So you see, we start from the start of coming into the service, and now you're exiting. Those individuals who decide that they want to exit the public service, whether it be after serving 10 years and they receive a gratuity, or whether it be they serve their entire years and they get their award at retirement. Okay, and again, we have confirmation appointment, which we mentioned earlier, disciplinary matters. Sometimes civil servants are of the view that discipline is not for them, or it does not happen. However, I can assure you, many civil servants are disciplined when they misconduct. And like I would say to anyone, sometimes it catches up with you when you least expect, or in a portion of your life when you did not realize that you have misconduct. Time catches up with us. Again, we have in-service training awards. That is when you are at that point, and let's just say you have an associate degree and you would like to perhaps pursue a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or some specialized area, which is considered a priority for your ministry. Then you can apply through your ministry for an in-service award. And once it is granted, of course, it means that whether it goes on limited in-service or full, that will be determined based on what your ministry has recommended for you. We have promotion, the big P. You know, that's one thing I can tell you. Every civil servant is interested in knowing, when am I going to be promoted? So, of course, at the commission, this is something that we process on a daily basis. Promotions. Publications of vacancies. Okay, yes, there's an advertisement. Perhaps they need a director. Perhaps they need some guidance counselor. Perhaps they need some head post to be filled. Some posts are filled by advertisements. Okay, we have reclassification. And reclassification can come along sometimes. You may be in a certain post, for instance. You may be today a general service worker, and then you get some additional qualifications, and that can make you a clerk. And so, of course, then through your ministry, once you submit your certificate, you would then be reclassified as a clerk. Or you can be reclassified to another post that is on par with your post. Okay, and then we have the reemployment. Oftentimes we have reemployment with pensioners or non-pensioners, and then again we have reemployment with persons a lot in the education. Those teachers, those expat teachers, or those foreign teachers. Of course, we reemploy them because they cannot be pensionable because they're not citizens of this nation. Okay, and then we have salary reassessment. Now, while salary reassessment is listed, this is not something that is practiced in the sense that back then, salary reassessment would have meant for someone, if they got additional qualifications, you would add up all of the years of their of experience and then add that to their salary at that point, and then you reassess them. So they come out with this big chunk of back pay, and now your salary has been reassessed. But as of 2009, that ceased. And so we then basically, what we look at in terms of salary reassessment is that perhaps MPS, which is, we said earlier, Minister of the Public Service, the PS may have appointed you, and she can only appoint you at the lower echelon of the service at the minimum of the salary scale as well. She may have appointed someone at the minimum. Take, for instance, teacher's aide. They may appoint a teacher's aide at a minimum salary of, let's say, $11,450. Well, today minimum wage went up, but let's say $11,450, and that will carry through until they now come to confirm this teacher in appointment. Well, once this recommendation is received at the commission, then we then take a look at it and reassess the person's salary based on the qualification for that post. And so therefore we look at that now as somewhat a reassessment, because now we would then match her qualifications, which is required for the post, at the salary which she's supposed to receive. And so that's how reassessment is somehow looked at today. And then, of course, we have transfers and secondments. Now, transfers of officers can only be with those persons who are permanent and pensionable. We don't transfer weekly persons or those persons who are on contract, those 52 weeks persons. No, this is basically really for persons who are within the service. And, of course, we have secondment. That often takes place at time. Let's just say you want to go to NIB. So you want to be seconded to NIB, you want to be seconded to an authority. And so, of course, that we process matters as such as well. Okay? The flow of submissions in and out the PSC. We will draw from an example of a trained teacher. And we will say that this trained teacher is being recommended for promotion to senior trained teacher. Trained teachers are in the department, and so therefore the Department of Education will make a recommendation to the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education will then make a recommendation to the Ministry of the Public Service. It is at the Ministry of the Public Service who checks to ensure that the Ministry of Education has complied with all existing policies relative to promotion and to ensure that the recommendation is in alignment before it can submit a recommendation to the PSC. That means the position that they're recommending for the trained teacher, it has to be in alignment that she would have met the post requirement for that position. That means that the trained teacher would have had to have the years of experience if required. So it is at the Ministry of the Public Service that really reviews this matter, and they scrutinize it to ensure that what is submitted to them from the ministry is in alignment with the policy. And once that is in alignment and the permanent secretary of the Ministry of the Public Service signs off and agrees, then it is submitted to the PSC with a minute basically giving us the recommendation. And once we at the PSC receive this recommendation, the secretary will then distribute it to the officers, who will then review this recommendation, looking at to ensure that the person is qualified, the post requirement, to make sure they meet the post requirement, the qualifications for the post requirement, to ensure that they meet the years of experience that is required for the post, to ensure that there's no supersession that has taken place. And so we at the Public Service Commission, they call us the watchdog. So what we're doing is we're watching to ensure that the policies that MPS put in place, that they stick to the policy. And so once we review it, and okay, there's nothing wrong with the submission, it is PSC ready, meaning that it can now move to the next level, where the board members then can now review this recommendation, and then they can make decision on the recommendation. And if the decision is that they agree with the recommendation from MPS, then it advances to the Governor General, the GG. The GG will then sign on that recommendation, and then it will send it back down to the PSC. We're now coming back down. And once the PSC receives it, we in return may have to do a KIV, what we call a short minute. And that minute basically going back to MPS, giving MPS the guidelines or the details what the commission decision was all about. This is where it's key again. Once MPS receives those instructions or the submission or the recommendation, the approved recommendation, they in return, they are responsible for the letters. Oftentimes you hear a person say, well, the commission ain't give me my letter. The commission don't give out promotion letters. That comes from the Ministry of the Public Service. And so the Ministry of the Public Service will then write to your ministry again, Ministry of Education, and it goes back to the permanent secretary who signs off and she agrees, and then it goes back from the ministry back into the department, and then from there you would receive your letter. So it goes through a whole channel, a whole stream. It goes through all of those ranks before it gets to you. And so sometimes when an individual says, well, why does it take so long? And my matter's been in such a long time. Sometimes if it is not ready from your ministry or your department standpoint, the holdup could be at any level because perhaps they need additional documentation. And so that flow, that is basically how matters are received in the commission and how they goes out of the commission. Okay, so we'll talk about it a little bit more.